You get it.
That's how my brain is too. You can see in there.
All right. Good afternoon. This is the Committee on Administration meeting for the County of Dunn. We are in room 54 of the Government Center. Today we have with us staff, 4 of our 5 committee members. So I would ask this call the meeting to order at this time. And Dan, would you take a verbal roll call, please?
Sure. Supervisor Vogel.
Here.
Supervisor Story.
Here.
Sorry. Supervisor Hedlund.
Here.
And Supervisor Bashan. And Supervisor Bauer is
Supervisor Bauer is excused. Other commitments for the day. All right. Thank you much, Dan. Approval of the meeting minutes. Our last meeting was here in this room, March 27th. Anyone make a motion to approve? Thank you, Supervisor Story. Second? Supervisor Bashan, seconds. Any concerns, questions, or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes. Thank you very much. Public comment. I have none. Dan has none. Any of the supervisors have any to share? All right. Move on. Staff reports. We hear from the committee. Administration does hear from the administration department, human resources, criminal justice collaboration, our treasurer, our IT department, our corporate counsel, and our county clerk. All those departments give us written reports along with updates on their current budgets. Any questions for anyone? We'll open for questions. Thank you. So,
Just
go
a
ahead, Supervisor Bashan.
question for our county clerk. As he's walking up, since we had our most recent election, if he could just provide us a little bit more of an update on that and maybe anything related to our SAVE Act as well.
Okay, so we had an election. That was neat. It was kind of a historic election for us. Typically in a spring election, we can have anywhere from a 32 to 36% turnout for an April election. We do have elections every April in the state of Wisconsin, so that's typically what we see. We had planned on this particular election to look similar to the 2023 spring election when we last had a state Supreme Court race. That was a 47% turnout. So we had budgeted and kind of planned for about a 50% turnout. So that's about as many ballots as we had printed. Of the 72 counties in the state of Wisconsin, I think there were 63 county clerks that were feverishly printing additional ballots throughout the afternoon on election day. We had a record-setting 59% voter turnout in the April election. Unprecedented, had never seen anything like that. It's great. Participation is always welcomed. But now we know we will be a little bit more prepared next time. Again, unprecedented. Everyone who wanted to vote still was able to vote. There was never any lulls in the process on election day, which is always really helpful. And the only thing I'll mention is that we now know that for the next 5 April elections, for the next 5 years, there will be a Supreme Court race in every single one of those elections for the next 5 years. Now, most likely, we won't see as much attention on the future Supreme Court elections, but you never know with the control and what's gone on and the partisan nature of what's happened with that office. So that's the update. And if you look in the report, I was a political science major, so there's a lot of political science detail, geeky stuff in there, which I think is really fascinating. Particularly the way in which Wisconsin is unpredictable, right? In November, we sent Donald Trump and Tammy Baldwin back to Washington in the same election. We're a very confusing state for a lot of people, so much so that I've been asked to speak at the Election Research and Science Administration Conference this June, because specifically they want to find out more about what's going on in Wisconsin and if we can explain that to people. It's going to be interesting to try to do that, because we are such a unique political state that way. So there was a quite a significant swing in election associations between the November election and the April election. So that information is in there as well. We're the second highest county in the state of Wisconsin for the way in which we changed politically from November to April. We had a 16-point swing to the left between November and April. There were two other counties in the state of Wisconsin that had a 17-point swing, so they beat us out by a little bit. But that's pretty significant. That means that we're most likely going to see a lot more attention here in Dunn County because of the drastic change in the political nature of the county. So it was an interesting election. We definitely learned a lot, and we'll be moving forward with that. Your second question was about the SAVE Act, I think. Okay. So currently there's legislation that's being proposed at the national level that is called the SAVE Act. And this legislation was actually passed last year by the United States House of Representatives, and it died in the Senate. It again was passed by the U.S. House this year, but most likely will again die in the Senate. Essentially, this is a kind of an election overhaul rule, and there's been a lot of attention on this because one of the things that would require is to prove citizenship to be able to be a registered voter. We already do that in the state of Wisconsin. Again, all the details aren't known because if it gets passed by the Senate and there are any changes, there would have to be some reconciliation. But essentially, if it stayed the way it was written and passed by the House, all of the current registered voters in the state of Wisconsin, because we cross-reference their registration with their Department of Motor Vehicles records, which proves their citizenship, everyone should be covered. The issue we might see is when anybody moves into Wisconsin or moves their residence in Wisconsin to re-register to vote. That's where we might see a little bit more complicated components of if a person needs their original birth certificate, and then if their birth certificate name doesn't match their married name, for example, or like through an adoption, there could be some more confusing parts about that. We're tracking it very closely, and we're working with the Wisconsin Election Commission to get ahead of the issue if it were to be passed and signed into law, but we're still kind of unknown with that. There's also been several different pieces. There's been some executive orders that have been issued around elections. Most of it's all being challenged right now, so it's all kind of still up in the air. We'll see what happens with that. But does that answer your question, Supervisor Bashan? Okay. Are there any other questions? Yeah, Supervisor Story.
Go ahead, Sue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I am wondering about passports because I know that's one of the things that's being considered is that everybody would have to have a passport.
Yes.
And what is the status of passports in your office?
Yes. So part of the SAVE Act was that everyone to be able to register would have to have a real ID or a passport. Most of the IDs in the state of Wisconsin now, if you go get your driver's license, they have the star in the upper right-hand corner indicating that they're a real ID. We have been trying very vigorously with the United States State Department to get passports back. If you recall, last year we put in an application to reactivate the license that was previously issued to the clerk of court's office. Clerk of courts did passports for a number of years until 2022 when they just decided they did not have the staffing structure. We did not have the staffing structure at that time either. So the license was relinquished back to the State Department. It still is it still is a license number that has not been reassigned. So we've been trying to get it back. But with the changes that have happened at the State Department between the administrations, we're kind of getting the runaround. But we are trying very hard still to get passports because we field probably around 50 to 75 calls every week asking about passports. So it's a huge demand. Passport licenses are issued by zip code. So they're saying that there are too many passport licensed facilities within a 50-mile radius of our zip code. Well, 54751 goes significantly up into Dunn County. And if you're saying that it's convenient for somebody in the town of Wilson to get to Ellsworth to get their passport, it's not really that convenient. It's quite a far margin. So we're looking at some of the logistics of that, but the update that we actually got this morning was that the State Department is looking at all the different passport licensed facilities and reassessing that jurisdictional based by zip code component. So
So is that one of those Secretary of State things that they're working on now in the federal government again, downsizing? That could affect you've done here as well.
downsizing is a component. There's also been, I guess, the Menominee Post Office reached out asking about a passport licensing. They want to start doing it. Hopefully, not to say anything derogative about our postal workers, but we should have it instead of them. And so we're trying to do that, mostly because we have a county, we have had a number associated with us. And the current deputy county clerk, Sue Brathole, when she worked in Pierce County, she did passports for 12 years. So we have somebody who's qualified to be able to do it and can get it going right away. So we're trying, we'll just have to see what happens with that. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
Anything else? No.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you.
Thank you much. Appreciate it. All right. Any other questions in the other departments?
Yeah, I had a question for,
Supervisor Vogel.
thank you. I had a question for Beata
Okay.
about the audit for the P cards. And I was curious what training or what mechanism will be implemented to kind of go from 44% or to 100.
Yes, I have some notes for you and I received the email, so I was trying to revisit my answers. So we did the first audit, which included for the P-card samples from November, December, and January. And keep in mind that we did not have a approved or adapted policy for P-card other than the ordinances that existed until January, late January. Then we executed the training with all the P-card users. I think it ran through mid of January through early February. During that training phase, this is where we went through with a fine comb. What is the policy? What are the do's? What are the don'ts? Also talked about the internal audit that would happen and what is going to be audited as attributes. So this has been out on the surface since then, regular meetings. I also had a department head meetings. So if it has been out there promoting this new policy and working very close with all the departments on this transition. So going back to the sample that was pulled, you'll see that it is, in a sense, I know it does not look as good as I would like it to be. However, this gives us a baseline to have before and after. Because by the time the training took place, a lot of the samples that are pulled from is before the training took place. However, there's still ordinances, and there was some level of expectations to how are we managing this P-card program, but it wasn't really clear because of gaps in policies as finance transitions, it just kind of fell off the radar for a while. So I brought this has been my goal since I started, but was always putting fires out. So in this audit, the policy, we do have internal audit policy, and I believe that was brought to you a few weeks back. Right. So in this policy, it just kind of says, what is my role in this? How are we going to pull samples? Are they going to be random? Are they going to be based on judgment? So it's a combination of both. So then we identify those attributes. What are we going to really measure? And even though if you look at the policy itself, there's a lot more that talks about do's and don'ts, but we identify those 5, 6 attributes that are instrumental. So one of the questions that came up was one of the questions that I had, so I'm just going to pull up my email. Are we paying these statements without proper statements? And if so, how are we verifying? So right now, before this policy existed, there was a checks and balances, but it wasn't in the form of a policy and internal audit process letting them know, yeah, we're checking. Yet before, it was known to be an expectation, but there was really no checking points. They were, but they were not as loud, if I might say. So take you back to ever since we were in this P-card program, finance staff would pull out data from the bank. And they would take that data and put it into the system for management to go and approve. So they would approve those transactions, but they would get a statement, but after the fact because they were mailed. So the gap was identified that, yes, you assuming here that the data that was brought from the bank matches the transactions that you said you did. Okay, so all the other departments had established their own procedures for balancing and checking. For example, some departments would delegate a task to say, if you have receipts, I'm going to be the gatekeeper of those receipts. And then at the month, I'm going to wait till the statements arrive and I'm going to match every receipt to that statements and everything. If anything doesn't add up, I'll let you know. So then again, the policy kind of went further and says, what is the responsibility and accountability? Should I be responsible for so-and-so card? If they go purchase what they need, I would have no way of knowing if any on here is actually what you bought. So there were these gaps, but have there been no oversight and approval? I would say that that's not true. There was oversight, just needed to be tighter and needed to be more monitored. So some of the samples did include a statement and some of them didn't. So when this audit came, a lot of us like, wow, I didn't know I had to. So this again goes back to repetition, revisiting. Even though we did some training, I continue on referencing back. Every department head received their detailed report. And in that detailed report, I asked them, if there was no attached statements, please go back and attach them. And they did. And if there was any question that says, you've attached a receipt, let's just say itinerary for a flight, I need a little bit more information to say, how does this justify county business? Oh, I went to training and here's my agenda. Okay, make sure it's attached. So as I did this audit process, this also gave me an opportunity to, again, revisit the policy and clear any questions that they might have as far as, well, what's a good document to attach? When do I attach it? One says, well, I get a statement mailed. It's like, okay, you can actually go to the bank portal and look at it. And I actually created step-by-step instructions on how to do that. So now they don't have to wait for the statement. They can just go there at any time and download it themselves. So it is then clear in the policy who's responsible for transactions. So if you're the card holder, then you have the responsibilities. But we understand that there is a change and there is a learning curve. But this first audit will serve us as a baseline. And you're going to be probably blown away next time you see this because I anticipate to see huge improvements. The other question was, without naming a department, does one stick out more than the other? Not really. I pulled out samples from all various departments and I can name the departments. So those county clerk, DHS, EMS, ENS, admin, which included IT. So the sheriff's department, UW extension, this went into make sure that I touched all the departments. So I'm not singling out one department over the other. And how does the random get selected? So Excel has this awesome feature that you can assign a random number to all the samples. And that's what I did. And then I sorted them randomly and I was like, okay, out of those, I'm going to pick 150. Sorted by 1 through 50, here's your sample. And then there were some that were judgmental samples, and those are based on a dollar amount. So I filtered my query to say, you know, if I'm going to spend time on looking at this, let's just kind of pick anything that's 250 or more, pull out a sample out of that. And then I went further, it's like, okay, let's make another judgmental sample and put with a different dollar threshold. So the dollar threshold was, so the question here was how much dollars of those did not include a statement? So that was about $21,000. But those average per transaction was about $686. But again, just because they didn't have a statement attached, that doesn't mean they didn't look at it or see it. Me at a surface going into the system, I don't know that. If it's not there, then the assumption is, well, did you look at it? Maybe you did, but it's just not attached. But we're fine tuning those practices to make sure that all the supporting documents are there. I'd be more than happy to share with you the detail via email if you like to see by department specific. But again, the intent here was not to shame anyone, but I really am using this internal audit as an opportunity to see what's happening. Here's the improvements, here are the gaps, here are the risks, let's work on them moving forward. So this, as the percentages might seem like, wow, but it will give us a baseline as we see the progression in this program. Okay, and you know, this is my first one, and ideally the internal audit does cover disbursements as well. So disbursements are, again, those are the items we write out checks for, like the invoices, you know, and then there's opportunities for there too. But first I need to set a template on how those samples will be. So I only had enough time to do the P cards. I'm working on the disbursements and to see those attributes that we identify for those are good. Like I make a test run to see if that's sufficient. But that internal audit will also include cash receipting, including how cash is receipted at the fair. So we are calling them off-campus. Off-campus, those are areas such as, again, meal sites, and then that would be fair, another one. So, and there's a definitions in that too, as far as, you know, how do we define off-site, in-site, and I think we did have a cash policy that's been, I don't know if it was in this packet or coming up, but we just finished that up as well. That identifies a lot of those. And then again, that internal audit will pick out those attributes right off of the policy. So if the policy says, do you have a secure way? Are you reconciling your bank statements? It'll be just testing yes or no type of a thing. Okay, so let's see if I covered all the questions. So our supervisors are approving the statements and forwarding them to the finance department without proper paperwork. Yes. So out of that sample, 16% of that population that I tested, which was 150, did not. So I think I've answered the questions that I got in an email, but do you have questions for me that are specific?
Just a reminder, when is the actual audit going to happen again to where we want to be ready for it?
Yes, every quarter.
Every quarter,
So,
so coming up.
So it looks like the schedule looks like this. So I will draw a sample for 3 months. And then that 4th month is where I do my, and then reporting to this committee.
Okay.
Because usually this committee meets later in the month. So for example, January, February, March, I'll pull them in the beginning of April so that I have this ready for this meeting in late April. So the next one I'll be pulling, it will be June. So you'll see me again here in July. So every quarter. But every month, we're still going through, every month we are looking at those transactions And before my staff approves them,
Mhm.
or anybody approves them, we remind them to make sure you check if there is an attachment, and if not, ask them right away to do it. So now we're not waiting till audit time to find out. So in the meantime, like I said, we're still continue on providing that guidance, reminding of the policy. What is the procedure? We just met with DHS team. They put together their internal procedure. They were very transparent with finance, see how that's going to work. They have very complicated programs. So it was really clear that if you are a P card holder, you are responsible what's charged on that card. They should be viewing them. They must be viewing them and going through, did I buy these? Because if somebody else does it, they would have no way of knowing if that transaction was not you or not.
When do the actual auditors come?
Oh, those auditors, okay.
Those auditors.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Somebody-
Our external auditors will be here next month, but they're doing the county-wide audit. And they were at the table looking at this policy and this internal audit process that I did to get their blessing. And they were like, yes, keep going and keep adding more. More of, as far as cash receipting, petty cash if we have any. So there's a lot of that. That's
Thank
still
you for all your work.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Any other questions for me?
Michelle?
Yes.
Just one clarifying thing. You mentioned the different departments you pulled from, but Extension doesn't have a P card, right?
I just probably, like,
So-
probably know I don't probably have extension. No, I'm sorry. Let's see. Yeah, anybody that would have a P card. So if they didn't, then they wouldn't be in a sample. So I probably
So- So thinking of
Yeah.
those that have
And
P
these-
cards, are there departments where one person has a card that's doing transactions on behalf of others? Or are
I
we
did
trying to
have
get a
card.
card to each person that would need it for transactions?
So that's an excellent question. Since we've been working on this policy, I want to say January, February, we've been working with all these departments. They've been involved helping us draft this. So we've met prior, what works, what doesn't. That gives us an opportunity to discuss what would that look like, what are they required. It's like, no, you can't share this anymore. We would do reviews. So those that needed a card, we made sure that they got it a card. So it was very clear way early on before, we formalized the policy that our practice would be do not. So then I worked closely with those departments to make sure that they did have. There were some departments that were like, well, they're not county employee. How does that? So we all vetted that through to really made a decision. So we know that if you're not a county employee, you will not have a P card. So P card is specific for county employee. But if there's a department, let's just say like DA's office, they have county employees and they have state employees. So it's just, so we worked close with those departments to see what is your need? And if you were sharing, you're not going to be doing that anymore, then here's what you need to do. So if you're not willing to take on that responsibility, then you have the option of not having a card. And at the same time, we didn't want to hinder or create obstacles for the departments, but it worked out really well.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beata.
Yep, you're welcome.
All right. Questions for other departments? I have one. And let's see, who do I want to ask it to? Well, anyway, I'll put it out there and we'll see who answers it. Prescription drug costs this past bunch of vouchers were over $500,000. Does anyone know what our annual budget, or did we actually budget that separately for what we anticipate our annual prescription drug costs will be? And we have Our Personnel Director, Jenna, is going to answer that for us.
Actually, if you could give me a few minutes, I'll look into the specific numbers
Okay.
and report back before the end of the meeting if
Oh, that's
that's allowable.
certainly good
Okay.
for me.
I could wing it, but I just want to look
Yeah.
into the detail
Okay.
and get back to you.
All right. Just got to see how we're tracking.
Yes.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll move on. Anything else for any of the committees? Departments. All right. Finance will review first quarter internal purchase card audit results, and we did that. Okay. Consideration of actions to be taken by the committee. Review the vouchers. Someone care to move the approval of the vouchers? Supervisor Vogel will move. Supervisor Bashan will second. All right, discussion? Oh. Okay, our CFO will take the stand.
Yes, I'll try to do what I did last time, just to kind of, I review these. This is again part of my regular review to make sure that there's supporting documentation. So a couple things, you'll notice that, oh boy, okay, should have been page 2 though. So like on, I'm at the treasure section. So that my page is 3, not sure what your page is. So you'll see that there's a PFMA 200, 1,250. Those are not duplicates. Those are actually for November, December, and January. And then so 2 of those invoices were actually put back into 24. So they kind of appears identical, and same with like circuit court clerk. So this would be my page 4. I'm not sure about yours, but it's the next page. And you'll see like family mediation. So you'll see those identical. Those are for 2 months, February and March. And down below, you're also going to see family court commission, like there's like 3,005. They're identical. And then those again are January, February, and March invoices. We have district attorney, there's like this maintenance contract for 18,000. That's a one-time annual thing. So we have emergency communication. There's a city of Menominee, in case you're wondering, what do we pay them? That's for our storage for the mobile command vehicle. And some of them, a lot of them are manuals. Patrol, their cell phones, just so you know, it's a monthly, but they have about 39 of users. There's one other tab, and it was, patrol again. It was body armor, and that was for 1 deputy. We have medical services for jail. You see like 25,000 from Southern Health. Those are again January, February, March, and April invoices. So those that, and kind of like you asked the question, well, why are they so late? So I did connect with them to make sure that it's not a regular. There's always anomalies. There's one vendor that had changes in their system, and they're like, here's all the invoices you owe us. So, but those are those. Then we have, public library, we have that 5,000, and that was on a resolution, and we all continue paying Doug for doing the website that's there too. I guess, I could go on all day, but do you have specific, anything,
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Story, please.
Yes, Beata, I'm wondering, as you look through, you've been saying some of them were for this month and that month and that month. It would kind of be nice to be able to see that total and know that total isn't just a monthly total, that it's actually what it encompasses, what period of time, you know what I'm saying?
So the way this report is it identifies each payment that was made to a vendor. So this
Okay.
report just says, this vendor, we paid them three They could have been paid on, because this is for March. They could have gotten paid March 1st, 3rd, 18th, whenever. So
Mhm.
could have been, it's multiple checks.
How do we really understand that though, whether it's just for the month or whether there's still some outstanding or?
Your question is, how would we know if there's any
Well,
outstanding invoices?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have check and balances. So if other departments have a relationship with vendors, they would know if vendors billing them monthly and to say, where's the invoice? I have not received one.
Mhm.
So, and I really don't have a clear answer for you. I don't have any mechanisms to say, yes, this provider you've been paying and we've heard crickets for the last 3 months.
Mhm.
I don't have a way, I don't personally connect with them, or do I, will ask my staff to do so, unless it's something that's obvious. They contacted us and say, I did not receive a payment, then we'll go through and we will research it.
So
Maybe
you
check.
would have a way of finding out department by department, whether or not there's some outstanding invoices that they haven't been taken care of or that they haven't heard from or whatever, to where you could.
If they're entered in a system and they're pending payment, I would be able to, but I will not be able to know if that invoice is sitting on their desk.
Okay,
So, and I know we'll be looking into this as we implement the new ERP, but
okay.
ultimately, I think what you're referring to is typically a purchase order. So when
Oh,
you,
yeah,
when you have that purchase order or purchase requisition, you know that a purchase has been made, but we're waiting on that invoice
Right.
to be done. And for the most part, that doesn't happen right now, or for those reoccurring payments, it'd be a blanket order. So you kind of have a feel for what's
So
going
you'd
on
have a
there.
purchase order that might be for the whole year, but to a specific vendor for a certain amount of money, and then you'd just be subtracting on that. And then when it's over, you'd have to do another one.
Correct.
Right,
And,
that's-
that is something I know that is being looked at, and I assume
Right.
policies written related to the
That's the way
ERP.
the school district does it. It
Right.
works.
And that was certainly something that had been brought up through the ERP process as an issue and something to be worked at.
It gives good checks and balances, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. And I contacted one department asking the same question, is why are they so late? And they said, well, because the provider, they just send us all the invoices in June, 6 months worth of invoices, and we enter them as separate because they all have separate invoice number. So they're treated as individual, but they might come in as one check. We're like, okay, maybe they have one person that does it. Actually, it's in the judicial center, external services for Kopisan services. They've got 6 months worth of invoices there. I know they're $67, but they just, maybe they don't think it's cost effective to put all the resources to bill us for $67. They just wait 6 months and do it all at once.
Well, when you're working on budgets for the next year, you kind of have to have a sense of,
Right.
how
Yeah,
it's
especially those that were in June 24 and December
Mhm.
24. So these are the ones that were on my radar. It's because first, that was in 24 budget, and we're going to go through audit and need to identify those, that those are accounted for in the right year.
We're on the same page.
Yep.
Thank you.
And if you recall, Jenna brought that up as one of the reasons we switched one of the vendors, is that they just continually were behind on billing, and it became a nightmare to
Mhm,
try to
can be.
figure out what our next year's budget should be, because we don't know what we spent.
Well, and what I've been able
Like
to
you were
figure
saying.
out in looking at your report is when you've got it highlighted, I know, okay, that's the total that
Total.
goes with that row, and, and so it's more easy to, so I'm looking more at the dollar amounts versus the vendor. And so that might relate to that blanket purchase order that we're talking about, that would make more sense. But again, it's not gonna tell me what's outstanding. And whether or not that's something we need to be concerned about, I don't know. So, thank you.
Michelle?
Just to expand a little bit on what Sheila was saying. So if a invoice is input immediately, but the vendor is a net 30,
Mhm,
so the check might not be cut right away.
mhm, that's right.
Are the transactions we're seeing when they are entered or when they are paid?
My understanding is when they were paid.
Okay, so something may have been entered a month ago and we might not see it till now.
Yeah.
Or
So
something might be
those
entered
were-
today and we'll see it next month.
Any other questions for her? All right. If you note, we also have our bonding at the bottom.
Or what?
If you look at the bonding payments at the bottom of that. So we have, then this month is 3,681,271.26, which we've had a lot of months that are under 1 million. So, all in favor of approval? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Beata. All right. Out of class pay extension, or what? Wait, I'm sorry. Here we go. Approval of financial policies. Our cash receipt policy, again, is included. Carry forwards policy. I can't remember that term. The ACH is the payment, automatic payment, no, automatic.
Automated clearinghouse.
That's what it is. Automatic clearing. This doesn't make any sense. That seems like magazine thing used to be. Anyway, automated clearinghouse. Sorry, for handling credit card payments and such. All right. And vendor onboarding policy. Those are all included in your packet. Anyone care to move for their approval? Well, after we make a motion. Anyone care to move? Okay. And second, all right. Okay, now we're open for discussion or questions or further information. All right, we have a question from Michelle.
Just on the cash receipt policy, just questions I had brought to me by a small department. Just seeking some clarification, because they are worried this is going to cause a lot more labor on their behalf. Because it's cash handling policy says like it must be a daily deposit or within 24 hours. But what they have done in the past is a deposit every other week, or if it's more than $50, because at times they will get a $2 payment. So it just seems like they're worried this is going to add a lot of work for very minuscule amounts. So if that's something that has any flexibility, and then what is this receipt system noted? Is that something current existing, or each department will have their own?
Dan?
Yeah, I am looking at the author.
So receipting system, so some departments will have a cash register, or they might have some other form of electric system, could be a database, could be a worksheet, anything that can generate a receipt. So just so they kind of fill under that umbrella, those what we are defining.
So no countywide uniform system.
Not yet. The ideally that would be if our new system would allow us to centralize it. We have money coming from all different avenues. So they come as wires, they'll come as a check, they'll come in as cash where people come at the window. We've also looked at options and solutions to simplify this process. For example, we've met with Bremer Bank and they offer what they call a lockbox. So what that is our remittances will say your payments go to this lockbox. And then from there, somebody else will process and feed that information. So we won't be touching cash, any checks that we might be receiving. So those are solutions that are available. But there's still individuals that will come to the window and make a payment. Treasurer is really big one on that. So right now we have like you said, $200 I'm receiving. Do I need a fancy system just to deal with $200 that I get once a month? So
$2.
right. So it might be appropriate to say, okay, well, you can have a register. And we did, when I met with all the various departments, that did come up and says, is this reasonable to ask 24 hours? What we don't want is cash laying without being laying around without being deposited, because the longer that it's not, the greater chances are that it can be lost or misappropriated or stolen. And so we also working with vendor that will allow us to get paid via credit cards online, so that if a consumer doesn't want to come to our building, they have the option of go online and make a payment. Or if they are here on site, they can swipe their card. So we're trying to provide different options for people to make a payment. There are departments that will just have $1. Then we ask, it's like, okay, well, I'm $2. Do you really want me to spend all these hours tracking that? So we recognize the minimal dollar amount that will outweigh the efforts that will go in there. But if a department does receive substantial amount, let's say $200 is a substantial amount versus a quarter.
So since the policy doesn't have any reference to dollar amounts, a department that takes in $3, they're just going to be out of policy? Or could we work something into the policy to indicate that?
So the policy says for every transaction or any money that's received, they need to provide a receipt. Is that one of them you?
Well, I'm thinking more they will process the deposit within 24 hours.
Yeah, or the next business days, whichever is convenient. So if they have a quarter,
Mhm.
right, or $2, can they go down in the treasurer's office and make the deposit? I think, you might argue that's not really, really good use of their time. It's not reasonable. But then policy is intended to kind of create that bigger picture direction, which also gives the department some of a flexibility on how they're going to achieve, how they're going to secure those funds. And to answer your question, I think treasurer was the one that was like, oh, I get a quarter for a copy. Do you want me to just create a receipt? Because part of the policy says,
Right.
if we should be letting consumers know that they should ask for a receipt, and we are going to be in a practice where we should be giving them a receipt. So for those smaller departments that are dealing with a quarter, we have a faster electronic device cash register. Peek, peek, there's your receipt, quick and easy. And I'm speaking from experience because I've worked at one county that consumer came and disputed the fact that I've made this payment and I've made it in cash and you guys lost it. It's your fault. Then yet there's no receipt, nothing for me to go and say, you did not pay. So we were left no choice but to write it off because they claimed they paid cash and we had no policy and no like an electronic receipting system, because in the cash register, every time you make a payment or accept, it'll track every transaction. So even if the consumer decided to throw away that receipt, you still have it in your register as a proof. Yes, you did pay, and here's what I have to show it. Because if you don't have these systems, then how do you prove otherwise? So I was just speaking from experience. I know quarters or small dollar amounts, but we did talk about, and I'll let Lynn here to chime in as well, because we did talk about that quarter for copies. It's like, well, if I collected quarters, can I just deposit them in 2 days?
Mhm.
I think that's reasonable. But what we don't want to promote is an ongoing practice. Like if we make an exception for a quarter, then some other departments will be like, well, $1,000 compared to my budget of $1 million is nothing. I'm just going to let it sit and deposit it at my convenience.
Right. I think that
So-
where it may be beneficial if we say, all money must be received in excess of $25, or
Okay, that's
to have a
reasonable.
minimal amount. Because then a department can't say, well, I have 100, that's not much. But if we had a set small amount in there, no more than $25,
Right.
then you can do a weekly deposit.
Right.
Have that number set, so there's no interpretation one way in one department and another way in another.
And then so also add, there's one very small department in which says, if you don't want to deal with these quarters, you can have them go to the treasurer and make your payment there. Which and that's always an option. In one department, it says, we used to do with petty cash exchanging, and we're just gonna say, no, we're just going to put in the statements, exact change and whatnot. We're just not gonna deal with any cash handling. They wanna have cash free. So we've offered other options for them to pay. Because, the sooner we get money in, then there'll be the less collections we would have to do. So we always wanted to make it convenient for the general public. So that is using technology, any methods we can to make that easy on them.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm wondering is, does every department have a vault?
Yeah, well, they should. So the departments that I did a cash review back in 2022. I met with every department. We sat down and I looked to see how they handle cash. Those that do have a lockup system. Lockup system is a bolted register. Veterans, for example, they have a bolted little safe to the cabinet that cannot be removed. Some departments have a vault, or, like treasurers, because they handle more money. Some of them will have lock boxes with a key. So in a sense, they are in the secure location off of praying hands from
So who does the deposits?
all departments will do their deposits
Their own
because
deposits?
they
So
can
if they
receive.
had a ledger that was like next to that thing where they're just putting in the quarters, whatever, and they're writing it down, 4.25, 50 cents, blah, blah, blah. Isn't that a possibility that you could do it that way, and that way there would be a record on every day, whether or not you deposited that day or not? Is that a way of maybe solving that
So
problem?
I piloted a cash register. It's really user friendly, at least I think. I to sat there by myself and programmed it, put some passwords and train them, show them how to do. It's really simple.
Okay.
And that creates a second receipt in a machine that
Okay.
keeps a memory, and it'll print a log, a report that they can reconcile then to what's in the drawer, and they can take up to.
Okay.
Right.
Still sounds like a little bit of work.
And I just wanted to follow up on the departments do the transactions where they accept the money, they hold it. That all gets brought down to the treasurer's office. We actually physically do the bank deposits from our
What I was
office.
thinking, that there'd have to be
Okay.
one person that would sign on and was doing that. So that's what made me think that ledger record of the day where you're going to go do the deposit. Well, this came from Human Services, this came from Judiciary, this came from the
Yeah, there's some accounts that they handle their own, the clerk of courts, they handle their own cash through their own processes. They don't always come from us. They have their own accounts and they write us a check out once a month to validate, and they send us reports.
And then who
showing how-
checks it against the,
I think that's gonna be part of the internal audit process that we've been working through with the
okay,
annual audit, external
Okay.
audit. And how do we verify that? That hasn't really been
okay.
a policy yet.
And that's what's in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
So-
Is, right, because I have training scheduled, are people that sign up for trainings. And part of that training will cover that, and what would the new process look like for those departments.
So I just wanted to point out, as you were suggesting edits, this is an action item. So when it comes to voting, you're voting on them as they are. If you want them amended, you would need to make an amendment, so.
And these are not in resolution form, but we would be approving what is here as what we would go forward with, or you can amend, or you can make a motion to return it back.
You can just tell us to try again and bring it
And
back
try
next
again.
Yeah,
month.
it sounds like it's the simplest way to do
You know,
it.
if you think there's too many changes that you would like to see, then, and we'd allow it to come back.
So and you have a motion on the floor, so you'd have to vote down that motion.
All right.
So is just a change for the dollar threshold for the required 24-hour deposit, or are there others?
I think that's the bigger thing that I've had raised to me as a concern is that threshold for the dollar. Um, I had not thought through fully a dollar amount. I would take any I was thinking maybe 25 if that others thought that might be a reasonable amount.
So I guess one thing I would point out as you talk about, we can certainly write a policy to make those exceptions, but these policies are written
Right.
based on recommendations from financial institutions and auditors and otherwise. And it seems like small amounts of money, but when you hear about money being stolen
Right.
from places, it's always the small amounts because those are the easy ones to hide. So
Like, go-
I
there's
I
a
guess I
book,
would
go to
kind
the
of
park.
caution against that. And I think as we talk about some of these smaller items, we can come up with other creative ways to be able to meet those needs without necessarily causing inefficiencies within the offices.
And the
I
cash,
just-
the cash register would be the,
We're piloting one right now with environmental services. They've got planning and zoning, land and water, and environmental services. So I've got a register that will accommodate all of them. They all have their own access with their own passwords, where it's really easy to navigate. And there's that manager who cannot void. That's another benefit of a register, so that if transaction is voided, it keeps a record, an audit record of all the activities. But that's granted that the register is used, because the customer can be there and just pay cash and you might not even touch that.
But they
So-
still have to make a deposit every day.
Yeah, the expectation is that any payment that consumer is making, it should be receipted in a system. There is no exchange of cash without touching a system, because that would be a violation of a policy.
I think I'm okay with it right now because I think I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, and you're doing some changing right now, so there might be some that would pop up later that we would want to talk about, but you've got that audit coming up, so that would certainly be a factor. So
So-
I don't think this is the time that I would want to be making any suggestions without having.
So I did run, this policy did go through our auditors, external auditors, Kerber Rose. That did get reviewed through my peers. This was also reviewed against the best practice that's recommended by GFOA, which is the Governmental Financial Officers Association. Also, Lynn and I spent significant amount of time uh, looking at this document as well, to using her level of expertise and my experience, what has worked and what didn't around cash. So it's gone through some ironing. With the audit finding that was on timely cash reconciliation, we needed to put those expectations. And now with this policy would be training and monitoring, which will go through the internal audit to say, are we doing everything that we can? Based on all those recommendations and the feedback best practice, protecting county's assets. So if it's easy to misappropriate or misplace or steal $1, what difference is it if it's 1,000? So we want to make sure we put tighter controls and apply the good practice. But I do appreciate, is it cost effective to deal? But like Dan said, we certainly are using other methods to see how we can. If it's like, well, then here's the options. And some, like I said, one department says, you know what, I'm just not going to do it.
So is
I'm just
that,
going to send them over to the treasurers to make their payment.
so did all departments get that message that they could just not take cash and send people to the treasurer?
That's
Or-
going to be part of the training. So I have a training coming up, and I think I have 4 or 5 different days.
Okay.
And anybody that's touches this process, sign up for the training. Last time I looked, I think I've got 36 people that sign up, different, but in total to sign up. Those are anybody that handles that cash. And so that's coming up training, and that's after this is approved, and now would then allow me to say, this is the expectation. So that would be covered, because as you notice, part of this policy there is how do we communicate to the consumers what do they ask for? And we should display that, yes, you should have a receipt. I mean, all the other businesses do, we shouldn't be any different. And also, if we're using, if you're giving them the option to pay by card, we should be transparent with them if there's any convenience fees that are involved, so it doesn't come as a surprise. So some of them, again, are best practice, and some of them we have to. It's a requirement, especially with the credit card world and how we use that comes with a lot of regulations as well. You know, we can't discriminate, we can't just intermingle fees. So there are a lot of items we need to follow when we accept credit cards. But that will cover that in the training.
So could you explain the process? So if a department wants to not take cash, but they still have things that they're charged for. So if they were to use the treasurer as their collection point, how would the communication work between the department and the treasurer? If it was something that was to be purchased for $3, how would they know to pay the treasurer and collect from the office?
So I wouldn't, so if a department is providing services, then there are going to be an exchange of money. So it might not be an option for them to say, well, we're providing these services and then but we don't want to deal with the money. So then we would have to explore option one. Options are, could we use a lockbox, or could those remittances say, send your payments to the treasurer's office? It would need some changing in a process on how they handle cash, but that doesn't take away the fact that somebody might come to the window and just say, I want to pay my bill.
Okay,
No, no buts, no.
Would just like to follow up on that. That we have not really talked about that at all, and we don't really currently have a cash receipting system that allows us to take other money than what our department takes. So we would have to consider the other options that there would be before. So that part's in the early stages, I think. It hasn't been developed.
So I'll give you an example. One department, we kind of reviewed what is their exchange, and like, so there's 3 to 4 people that actually touched the transaction before it made it to her. She was like the 4th. So when we started looking, it's like, okay, why does it go from here to here to here to there? Try to streamline it, because the more steps, then the more chances are it could be misplaced or something could happen in the transit of that money before it makes it to the bank. So we looked at those and asked those questions to say, how can that be streamlined? So then one department says, well, the reason that happens is because I don't know how to use the system that we have to do it. It's like, okay, well, maybe we should train you. That's maybe a training opportunity to say, well, maybe you can just receipt it there. And then we talked about other departments that are having services is looking at their remittance to say, okay, if you don't want this money to come here, where should they go and how should that be communicated to the consumer? And that would be part of that remittance or coupons. So we would explore options. I mean, the lockbox at the Bremer Bank sounded attractive as they were promoting it, simply because that would be cash, hands-off cash for a lot of the services that we would bill. You know, like like insurance companies, they pay for when we bill insurance, they'll send us money. A lot of them are wire. But there's still checks that are coming through from the state. And sometimes some of those entities will say, no, we don't do wires. We're just the old fashioned way. We're just going to continue on sending checks.
So, yeah, and I guess I think it's obviously you've seen, we've put 4 policies through last month and 4 policies through this month. We're working on a lot of these financial policies, and Supervisor Story had mentioned it earlier that we're definitely trying to document a lot of the work that has been done over time, and this is in direct response to audit findings. And so I think obviously you get to choose what you do, but I would say that I think we hear what you're saying, but I think that we can find a way to make that work. And if we can't find a way to make that work, we'll come back and do that and make changes to that policy in order to allow those exceptions. But we'll do that really under the advice of of the auditors. Yeah, just to make sure that we're doing it in the best way possible.
I think specifically for the cash receipt policy, I think I'd like to see the procedures a little more in place before we pass the policy. Because it seems like we're putting I don't know, the cart before the horse a little bit. If we don't know what the procedure will be, how can we set the policy on it? So I think it might be beneficial to have more procedures in place so then we can say, yes, this is the procedure and the policy that covers those procedures, instead of trying to make the procedures after the policy.
Best practice is to first identify what needs to happen. And that's typically communicated or drafted in a policy. The procedure is how are you going to achieve that? So that's, very common to go in that order. It's not to say that it can, because we did review procedures to understand, well, how do we need to fine tune our policy? So they go hand in hand. In that policy also allows other departments to create internal procedures, but will be approved by the finance myself. I know there's a lot of information that we're throwing at you. And like Dan said, we'll give it a test run as we do the internal audit. As things come, we'll modify it as it needs to. But right now, we don't have a policy.
Yeah, so I think this is just putting the best practice in. If this ends up being unfeasible for departments, they need to bring that to Beata or my attention, and then it can get addressed with time and modifications based on recommendations by our external auditor.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chair,
I guess.
what what she's wanting maybe to say is, do we want to make an amendment to the policy at this point so that there's something then out there, even though we don't know how it's ultimately going to end up, given they're trying to do this process and they just need that policy in some form in order to proceed? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so that departments are allowed to work on their procedures on
Mhm.
how they're going to meet that policy.
And then maybe what we can do is come back to this after the budget is passed, which would be November, December, and see how it went.
Absolutely, I appreciate that, because this also will allow me to do an internal audit process, at least one cycle or two in the cash handling to see how it works. We'll test it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and I think that's the typical process. You create that policy, you create the procedures around it, and then you audit to see how well you're doing in meeting those policies. And some of the times, if you're not meeting those policy requirements, you either have to change the way you're doing things or change the policy. And so it's kind of a cyclical process as that goes through. So,
I'd like to offer an amendment to the motion on the floor. Is I would like to amend that we bring back the cash receipt policy for review in 6 months, so that we have a set date that we will be looking at it again.
But in meantime, would this policy be active for us to pursue the training and
Yes.
But the amendment is going to be attached to the policy saying to be revisited.
Yeah,
sounds
And I would second that.
okay. All right. Do you have it? Give Dan time to, you want to state it again?
So to bring the cash receipt policy back to the committee and administration in 6 months to review.
that'll be October.
That would be November, right?
No,
After it has been enacted.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. First, then we need to, we have a motion
Any other
And a
discussion on
second.
the motion?
on that amendment. Any other
Discussion.
discussion on the amendment? All right, hearing none. All in favor of amending that the cash policy to state that it will be reviewed in 6 months?
Aye.
Aye.
And now we can pass the policy.
Any opposed? All right. So now we can go back to our original and approve the suggested policies for handling of cash throughout the,
Are we doing each policy separate or?
no.
Oh,
all-
say the original.
Question
motion
has
was for
part of
all.
it. Go ahead.
Could I had a question about the carry forward policy.
Okay. Okay.
So, so carry forwards go from the department heads to the county manager
and to the chief financial officer. And so you determine whether it's,
Meets the criteria per the policy.
it's the standing committees. It's already gone. through-
It's gone through the
reviewed.
yes, that's
Okay.
correct. And then this is where we've made it a little different than usual because of the resolutions for consistency. I've said there that I'm gonna own that. So as they come through the request, and a formal approval would be in the form of returning them a drafted resolution for their standing committee.
And just, there's a slight typo in D2.
That was probably
It's like, it's the county manager are not manger, right? So you might wanna
Yes,
correct,
thank
but
you.
I just to see that.
I'll fix that. And just like any other policy, that has also been reviewed by our auditors for their recommendations, and they agreed that it's pretty good to give it a run.
Any other discussion? Going once, going twice, no other questions? Okay, we ready to vote? All right. So our vote would be accepting the policies as we have before you in our packet. Again, they are, is it 4 of them here? I'm gonna review them.
There's last month's too.
Dan, you went 3. Okay, yeah. I had 3 and then my scroll works I'm too big a thumb here or something. I don't know. I'm just too fast. All right. So the 3 policies, the policy on cash handling, the policy on carry forwards, and again, the policy on ACH or Dan is going to tell me.
So it is the ACH vendor onboarding policy.
that's
So
what
this is getting a new vendor that we are going to pay via the automated clearinghouse is kind of what that's covering.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
As opposed to a new vendor that we would pay via check.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any questions about that? All right. And as amended, both by a note on a typo and the amendment offered and approved. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Yeah, to thank you for your time, your explanations,
You're very
all the
welcome.
background work.
Thank you. We've got some more coming, so stay tuned.
All right. Okay. We have a out of class pay extension for child support agency. Again, we have someone who is filling in. Luckily has the training to do so. Any questions on that request? Here to make a motion for approval.
Classification paid for the subject as noted.
Okay,
A second.
all right. Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Consideration report and resolutions. Going to the board from this committee, we have none at this time. Please make note, our next meeting will be May 22nd, 2025, 3 p.m. here in room 54. Or 60. I can't. I don't get that out. I mean, for 10 years, even, no, whatever, many years. It just pops up. That's only 3 months in a row. So, give me the 4th month. Jenna has a back. Yeah. Yeah.
No.
No, yeah, if you do have, I'm sorry. Thank you. I forgot to turn around and go back there.
Well, first I'm going to turn the mic on and then I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully. Okay, can everyone see that
Yep.
somewhat? All right. So a simple question has a somewhat complicated answer. So I thought I wanted to kind of prepare my explanation for this. So our self-funded health insurance is intended to pay for itself each year. So as far as how that's budgeted, we have this revenue line right here, this 9.2 million and some change. That is our anticipated amount that we will collect in premiums. So that's both the employee contributions as well as the county's portion of that. So like we're kind of, the county's paying the self-funded insurance fund and employees are. And so basically that is the number that we anticipate receiving in revenue. And that's the number that we work within for operating expenses. So far this year, we have received 1.973, and that's in those premium contributions. And we have paid over 2.3 million. So you can see right now, as is point in time, we are paying more than we're taking in. With that being said, those claims and prescription expenses ebb and flow throughout the year. So we could pay a much lower number next month, and then this would be fine. Another variable would be any stop loss reimbursements or prescription drug rebates that we receive. Normally there's a 3 to 4 month delay on those types of things. But as far as the cost that you saw come through on the voucher report this month or for March, that is a bit higher than normal. So looks like January we paid 364, went up in February, and then it's up even higher in March. So that is a little bit higher of a number than you're used to seeing. Hopefully we see things stabilize as the months go on throughout the year, but it is a very fluid number. Does that help?
Yeah, and it is a budgeted number that we get from the, which company? From the insurance, from our insurance company, right? They help us identify the projections for that.
Yeah, so basically I'll go back to this. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Here we go. This 9.2, that's the number that our consultants project based on our claims history each year, and they tell us this premium amount is a sufficient amount based on your claims history to fund what you would expect to see throughout the year. So similar to most budgeting, it may be on, it may be off. But the good news is that we have kind of like a reserve in our self-insurance fund. This is assigned, is that the right term? Assigned dollars within our self-insurance fund that there's a cushion there. So let's say we don't take in as many premium payments and we have higher claims for the year. We do have, I think it's about like 3.6 million in the reserve to cover that difference.
I know that, and it's just, we have employees who have even asked about reviewing, for next year already, or in future about, what about premiums and, obviously premiums are high and they are across the nation. That's just not, we're not, Dunn County. But, just to watch that and I think just, even employees can, ask those questions. I hope they do. But you can kind of see that, we have some reserve and we have some here, but again, I think we need to operate the way we're operating. We try to do it with the most intelligent, informed way that we have available to us. And hopefully, we have, like you say, I see it slide back down and we could say, next year we can do this. But thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
When we passed the raise in the insurance rates, I remember one of our questions was the cost of insurance going to take away whatever they might have received in a raise? Have you had any as step or any of that stuff taken care of, any of that as a problem? Or are you finding that somebody or anybody might be coming to you and saying, you know, I'm getting less money this year than I did last year?
I think it's possible, but one thing that we were really intentional about was kind of explaining the difference between the two plan options. We have the two options, one
Uh-huh.
being a low premium, high deductible,
Uh-huh.
the other being a higher premium with a lower
The
deductible.
7,000 deductible versus
Yeah.
the, yeah.
Yeah, so we had provided some scenarios for folks to consider, and of course, you know, there may be some that determined, you know, the higher cost premium might be the best fit for them. We did, I think actually Dan did the math during a meeting. We did determine that like the increasing premium didn't exceed anybody's wage increase. So the intention was not for anybody to have a lower paycheck. Yeah. I will also note that like if you kind of see this actuals number, you can see that for 2024 we landed in the red, I guess, in the negative. This number I wouldn't fixate on much. Really, that final audit report is what we're going to want to see as far as where that self-funded plan landed for 2024 and how much needed to be kind of taken out of that reserve. For the last 3 years, we've always put money back. So, however, that being said, it may be a year in 24 where the backup might decrease a little bit. But our fund is over more than healthy, more than what's recommended. So I'm not concerned about that at this time. Okay.
Yep.
Any questions?
Anyone else? Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Jen.
Just like to stay tuned on that big part of the budget, and it's an employee benefit we want to continue the best with we can. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you all for attending, audience for listening, and department people for helping out.